I remembered that when I was about 10 years old, my family moved into a new house. We had lived in a smaller house that was about 10 minutes away. The new place was bigger and overall nicer in every possible way. In this house, I also got my own bedroom for the first time ever. In the past, I always had to share with my brother. Now my brother, my sister, and I all had our own rooms. My bedroom was in the back corner of the house, and I had a window that looked out to the backyard. On either the first night after we moved in there, or one of the first nights, I was in my bedroom and trying to fall asleep. I had just turned out all the lights, and it was completely dark. I wasn't really all that tired though, and I was there in bed with my eyes closed and hoped to fall asleep soon. That's when I heard a knocking sound. I really had no idea as to what it was. It wasn't coming from my window, but it sounded like it was coming from close to me. Other than the knocking, things were completely silent. I just figured that it was probably my brother in his bedroom, which was the next room over. He was probably moving something in his room, or else trying to mess with me by knocking on the wall. He would pull pranks on me sometimes doing things like that. I didn't even bother to figure out what exactly the knocking was, and I ignored it. Soon, I fell asleep. As far as I knew, it was nothing. The very next night, though, I heard it again. I couldn't sleep and was lying in bed just trying to get tired. Then I heard the knocking again. This time, I was more curious as to what the noise was. I found it really strange to hear it 2 nights in a row. The knocking continued for probably several minutes. At one point, I decided to try and figure out where exactly it was coming from. I sat up and listened closely. For some reason, I just couldn't figure out where the noise was coming from. I got up out of my bed and walked over towards the end of my room. Then the knocking stopped. I stood there for a moment. I just couldn't quite figure it out, and I went over and looked out the window. That's when I saw a man walking out of my sight. It was really dark back there, but the guy was probably only about 10 feet away from the house when I first saw him. He walked farther away and disappeared behind a large tree. Suddenly, I was really scared. I couldn't believe what I had just seen, and I didn't get a good look at the man at all, but obviously, I knew he wasn't supposed to be back there. My parents and everyone else was asleep, and I didn't want to wake anybody up. It seemed like the man was gone now, but I didn't know if he would come back or something. I decided to try and just go to sleep. I got back in my bed and laid down. After closing my eyes, it took quite a long time, but eventually I was able to fall back asleep. I didn't hear any knocking or any other strange noises for the rest of the night. The next morning, I told my parents about seeing the man in the yard. They seemed really surprised, and I remember that my dad went out into the yard and looked around. He said that everything seemed fine, and figured it was probably nothing serious. There wasn't really much that could be done at that point. The guy hadn't tried to break in, and I only saw him for a few seconds. Plus, we had no idea who he was. I just hoped that I wouldn't see him again, and I thought that that would be the case. But I was wrong. That very night, I once again got in bed and turned out all my lights. Within probably 5 minutes of that, I heard knocking again. But it was coming from my window this time, and there was no mistaking it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I sat up and looked over to the window. A man was looking in, directly at me. Without hesitating, I jumped and sprinted out of my room. I ran to my parents' room and burst in, waking them up. By the time we got back to my room, though, the man was gone. I stayed up literally all night, and the police were called. After searching the property, they couldn't find him, and once again, nothing was messed up in any way. After this incident, the man didn't come back. I moved my bed into my brother's bedroom and slept in there for 2 weeks, and when I returned to my room, everything was fine. I still can't believe how the guy was right outside my window, though. I don't know who he was, or what he wanted, or why he was there. This is something that happened 2 years ago when I was in college. I had just moved into a new apartment. The apartment was a few blocks from campus, and I would be living there during the school year. It was a small 1-bedroom place, and not the nicest, but it was all that I could afford. I was sure that it would be good enough for me, and I was happy to live by myself. For all of my other years in college, I had roommates. I got the place in June, but didn't move in until August. My parents came down and helped me move all my things into my place. Shortly after moving in, and one of my first days there, I got a knocking on my front door. I looked out the window to the front step. There was a woman standing there. She was short and had long dark hair and looked to be maybe in her 40s. I opened up the door to see what it was that she wanted. She said hi and told me that she lived next door and saw that I moved in. She just wanted to say hi. Something about the woman immediately seemed a little bit off, though. I couldn't tell what it was exactly. Still, it was nice of her to come over and say hi, and I was friendly and said thank you. There was a few awkward seconds where she just kind of stood there. I broke it by asking how she likes living here. The woman said that she liked it and started to walk into my place as she was talking. I was confused seeing this, but after she got inside, she turned around and walked out only a few seconds later. Then she stopped talking and just stood on my front step. It was a really awkward experience. I told her thanks for stopping by and that I would let her get back to her place. She just kind of said okay and took a few slow steps off of my front step. After I closed the door, I looked out and she kind of stood around the front of my place for a while before walking back. I didn't really know what to make of it. Maybe she was just being nice, but was just a bit shy or awkward. It was odd, but not that big of a deal to me. But the very next day, as I was at home by myself, she came over and knocked on my door again. When I saw her there, I considered not answering, but she saw me walking by, so I decided to see what she wanted today. I opened the door, and the woman immediately asked me what I was doing. I was a little confused by this. It was another awkward interaction with her, and she didn't say much else, and soon walked back to her place. I just went back to what I was doing after that. And later is when things got really weird. Probably 2 days after that encounter, I was woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of somebody knocking on my front door. When I looked at the clock, it was 2:30 in the morning. Very carefully, I left my bedroom and walked over to my front door. After looking out, I saw the woman was there again. I couldn't believe it. What was she doing here in the middle of the night? I really didn't want to answer the door. I hid in a spot behind the couch where I could sort of see her, but she wouldn't be able to see me. She stood at my front door and knocked again. After I didn't answer, she appeared to try and look inside my window. She then moved to another window and looked inside. The woman kind of walked around on my front step before knocking yet again. Of course, I wasn't going to answer. This was making me worried though. I didn't know what she wanted, especially at this hour. Finally, she left. She was at my place for probably 10 minutes at least. I was able to go back to bed after that. The following day, I didn't see her at all, but the day after that, I did. It was a day that I had classes, and I decided to walk to campus. It took maybe 5 to 10 minutes to walk, and the weather was nice. When I left my apartment, I got out to the sidewalk with my backpack. Soon, I saw the woman, and she left her apartment and started walking down the sidewalk behind me, but she was pretty far back, like maybe 50 feet. I pretended not to see her, and ignored the fact that she was now walking towards campus behind me. She stayed behind me all the way there, until I got to the building that my class was in. When I got inside, I'm not sure where she went. She did not follow me into the classroom. When class was over, I didn't see her, and I forgot about it. I didn't see her for the rest of the day. In fact, after that experience, I didn't see her for over a week. I sort of forgot about it, but occasionally would remember. I wondered what was going on. Then, one day, I ran into another one of my neighbors. It was a man who lived in the apartment building, and I hadn't met him yet. We got to talking, and he asked me if I knew the woman who lived next to me. I said yes, and the guy told me that she had been arrested for breaking into another apartment unit. He said that he always thought she was strange and figured that she did a lot of drugs. That very well could have explained her behavior. I didn't end up seeing her for the rest of the time that I lived there. I think she moved somewhere else, because I noticed someone else moving into her place at one point. Last year, I moved into a new house that I was renting. It was a small house in a typical neighborhood. I would be living there by myself for at least the next year after starting my new job. The house was somewhat old, but in pretty good shape. Shortly after moving in, one night, I got a phone call randomly. It was really late, probably 11 p.m. I did not recognize the number, and I found this really strange, but out of curiosity, I answered it. The person on the other end sounded like a man, and he spoke in a deep voice. It sounded as though he was trying to disguise his voice, possibly. He said that I better get out of that house now. I figured he was referring to the house that I was in. Then, before I had a chance to say anything, he hung up. I was really confused and also creeped out. I didn't know who would do something like that. Possibly it was a prank of some kind, but I didn't know of anyone who would do something like that to me. I was left feeling really creeped out. But the person called back only a few minutes later. This time, when I answered, they said, "I'm serious. You better get out of there." He hung up again before I had a chance to ask who it was or say anything. I tried calling the number back, but my call was rejected. I was thinking hard to try to figure out who would do that. I thought that possibly it was a neighbor who saw me in the house and didn't know that I had moved in and was renting the place. Or possibly it was just a prank. They didn't call again for the rest of the night, and soon after I went to bed. But that very same night, I was woken up to the sounds of someone banging on my front door. They were pounding loudly on it, and it certainly would have woke anyone up. It startled me, and I got up and went downstairs. But when I got down there, it had stopped, and when I looked out to the front yard, nobody was there. Whoever had been doing it had left. But as I was looking out front, there was then a loud banging noise coming from the back door to my house. Whoever was doing it must have been basically banging their fists on the door as hard as they possibly could. This went on for a good 10 seconds before it stopped. I went around to the back and turned the light on, but I didn't see anybody there. They had left again. I stayed up looking out both my front and back windows and alternating between the two, but whoever was there did not come back. I considered calling the police, but decided not to. I ended up just going back to bed. The next morning, though, I went outside and inspected the areas where the person had been. There was no damage or anything like that. I called my landlord and told him about what had happened. He didn't really seem to care much, though, and just said to call the police if anything gets broken or damaged. I asked him if there had been any problems like this in the past, and he said he had no idea, but none that he was aware of. I wasn't really sure what to do. I went to work that day, and when I returned home, got my mail. There was this one letter in the mailbox that was hand-delivered. I know this because it wasn't even in an envelope. Really, it was just a piece of paper folded a few times. When I unfolded it, there was red marker that said, "Leave now," with a bunch of exclamation points. Somebody really didn't want me living there for some reason, but I didn't know why. The house wasn't super nice or anything like that, but this was enough for me. I contacted my landlord and told him that I wanted to move out, and I explained the situation. He was not happy about it and tried to charge me a fortune for breaking the lease. I ended up having to pay rent for the next 2 months, but I didn't even care. Luckily, I didn't have much furniture, and I moved out of there and found another place after less than a week. It was a nice little apartment, and I didn't have any problems there. I never found out who was responsible for calling me or pounding on the door or who wrote the letter. I also don't know why whoever it was didn't want me to live there, but luckily, I wasn't bothered by them again. I'm going to tell you a story that happened a couple of years ago. At the time, I was a 25-year-old female and had recently moved into a new apartment. I really liked it. In fact, I was on the wait list for the place for a couple of months. When I was finally able to get a unit there, I was really excited. I soon moved in, and not only was the apartment great, but the location was as well. It was less than 10 minutes from downtown of the major city that I live by, but far enough that it wasn't hard to get around. There was a nice park with a walking trail right by my place, and some businesses and restaurants within walking distance. This incident occurred the very first week that I lived there. After work one day, I went for a walk and then walked to a local place to get some food. Then I went back to my place and relaxed for the rest of the night. It was really nice outside that day, so I was glad that I got to spend some time outdoors. My apartment unit was on the second floor, and I left the door to my balcony open a little so the air could circulate. This proved to be a bad decision. I was woken up at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I heard a sound coming from the balcony area. Then I heard my screen door opening, which is very loud when it moves. I was in shock and couldn't believe it. I didn't know how anybody would get onto my balcony because it was on the second floor, but there was definitely somebody there. After hearing the noise of the door opening, I didn't hear anything else for a little while. I decided to get up and look. Maybe there was an explanation of some kind. I walked to my bedroom doorway and looked out into the living room. It was completely dark because all my lights were off, but when I looked over to the door to the balcony, I saw someone. There appeared to be a man standing there, and he was just inside from the balcony. As soon as he saw me, he started to walk over. I quickly moved back and shut my bedroom door. Then I locked it. As soon as I did, I heard the man walking closer in my direction. Soon, he reached the door, and he tried opening it. I moved back and ran into the bathroom that was connected to my bedroom. This door also had a lock, and I went inside and locked it. Now, I heard the guy pounding on my bedroom door, almost as if he was trying to break it down. I called the police as I was in my bathroom. I was told they would be there within 5 minutes. As fast as that is, it seemed so long to me at the time. I was just hoping that I could make it that long. After pounding on my bedroom door several times, I didn't hear anything for about a minute. I was hoping that maybe the guy had left, until I barely heard his footsteps again. Then there was more banging at the door. It seemed to only get louder and louder. This continued for about a minute, until I heard what sounded like the door breaking. Only a few seconds later, it was confirmed to me when I heard the man walking in my bedroom. Soon, he came right up to the bathroom door and tried opening that. But after he couldn't get in because it was locked, he did not try breaking that door. After only 5 seconds or so, I heard what sounded like the man walking out of the room. He then left my bedroom and went back into the living room area of my apartment. I couldn't hear much after that. In fact, I didn't hear anything for a good 5 minutes until I heard footsteps in my apartment again. This time, though, it was the police. The man must have either heard or seen them arriving and left. But when I left my bathroom to see the police inside my apartment, they told me that they had caught the man. I saw my bedroom door all smashed up and broken, which the man had actually used my vacuum to break it down. The man had climbed up on my balcony from the one below. He didn't live in the building, but somehow he must have known that I did. Possibly he saw me when I was out walking. After that happened, I always slept with the balcony door closed and locked. Back when I was about 12 or 13, my parents and I moved into a new house. It was somewhat small, but in a nice little neighborhood near the city. I remember that we had been renting a house not too far away, and it took us a few days to move. We didn't have a moving truck or anything, and just used my dad's truck over the course of the last couple of days that we had the rented house. When we had finally moved completely into our new house, I remember that at night I was home with both of my parents. The house had 2 floors and a basement. My bedroom and my parents' bedroom was upstairs, and on the main floor was the kitchen, living room, dining room, and bathroom. My parents and I were just going to bed upstairs. I remember that I was looking for something, and I can't remember exactly what. I think it was like one of my pairs of shoes, but I couldn't find them in my room. It might have gotten lost someplace during the move. I went downstairs, and everything was dark because all of the lights were off and nobody was down there. First, I looked around near the front door. Then I walked over by the kitchen, kind of. I only turned on one dim light, and then I opened up a closet that was down there. But as soon as I did, I saw a man standing inside of the closet. I jumped back and started to run away. At the same time, the man left the closet and ran away to the left. At first, I thought he was chasing me, but he wasn't. I ran back upstairs and pounded on my parents' bedroom door. They came out and asked what the problem was, and I told them there was a man downstairs. I didn't want to go back down there, and I stayed upstairs as my parents went down to check it out. About 10 minutes later, they came back up and said that they thought the guy had left. At that point, I finally went back downstairs and looked around with them. The back door to the house was unlocked, and looking all around the closets and everything, the guy was nowhere to be found. I was glad to see this, and finally, we were all able to go back to bed. The next morning, after I got up, I was the first to go downstairs. It was a Saturday, so I didn't have school, and my parents didn't have work. But when I woke up at like 7 a.m., I just wasn't tired. As I was walking down the stairs, I was sure that I heard the noise of someone else down there. I thought it was one of my parents until I got to the bottom of the stairs and just for a second saw the man again. He came into my sight and then went out of it very quickly and went down into the basement. I ran back upstairs and once again woke up my parents. This time we called the police and all waited upstairs until they got there. As we were upstairs waiting, we didn't hear any noise at all coming from downstairs. When the police arrived, they entered the house and found the man hiding in our basement. None of us had ever seen the guy before. He hadn't stolen anything, but he had likely been inside of our house all night, which really creeped me out. The way that he got inside was likely the back door, which one of us must have left unlocked. We don't know how long he was in there either, but luckily he didn't harm anyone.